Hi, my name is Suzanne Block from Shape and Scale. Today I'm going to talk about public relations, building stronger relationships, and enhancing brand image. So let's jump in. Let's start with who I am. So I am a co-founder at Shape and Scale. Shape and Scale is a RevOps and public relations consultancy. We focus on B2B SaaS companies. So that's kind of our market. I personally have been in communications and public relations for the entirety of my career, about 16 plus years. And what I do as a communication strategist is I really work with organizations to elevate their brand, to basically achieve growth, brand differentiation, brand awareness. Through that, I work with executives directly one-on-one to work on their personal brands as well, because it's kind of all part of this symphony of brand building. As part of that public relations umbrella, I work with reporters, specifically media and analysts. I'm kind of that go-between to help, reporters write and analysts get to know organizations. I write content as well, so anything that's external facing, I usually write. I'll get into that a little bit today. And I manage social media as well. I will say I'm not like a social media strategist. That's a field all onto its own. But I help organizations think through their social media strategy and execute it as well. Okay, so with my presentations, I always like to start macro and then go more into the micro. So today is no different. So what is public relations? The Public Relations Society of America is kind of one of the biggest societies, one of the biggest professional organizations that exists for PR people. And they define it as strategic communications processes that build mutually beneficial relationships between organizations and their publics. So breaking that down a little bit, essentially public relations is that middle layer between a company or an executive and the public. So that's actually what drew me to the field in general, is like being able to digest things that are going on in an organization, whether it's really technical messages, technical products, and being able to distill it down and share it out with the public in terms of a story. What's interesting? What is this company doing? What's new? What's different? Those are the types of things that PR people think about all of the time. So we are that middle man go-between, if you will. So a good PR person, I think, has 4 attributes, especially in a technology industry. First, they understand the product. So they have a deep understanding of what the product actually does. What are the features? What are the benefits? What are like the selling points? Like, how are we selling this product? How are we winning? How are we losing when we're selling? It's really important for a PR person to hone in on some of those things. So let's just say an organization is not competitive in a specific feature or a specific set of functionality. We know not to hone in on that from a public perspective because we're not quite as strong competitively. Wrapping into that is understanding the competition. So understanding who we're going up against from a sales perspective. We have a strong grasp on the landscape. And that really helps us kind of like relate and communicate with an executive team that are so focused on their own product and maybe their own roadmap that they're not quite as focused on what others are doing. So it's kind of a topic of communication and strategy when we talk about how we differentiate from the pack. So a PR person really understands that landscape and is able to offer strategy as a result. Understands the user personas. So this is who we're selling to, our ICP, our core persona that we are selling to. What are their pain points? What are their preferences? What makes their lives easier? And how is the way that we're selling and our product impact them for the better? That's an incredibly important part of storytelling when it comes to public relations, because we really want to hone in on what the benefit is of the product of the company to that persona. And then we need to know what the external audience needs. So this includes reporters, podcasters, just like general media and influencers, like what's being talked about in the community, what is interesting to the community, what is considered hype in the community and not actual reality. We need to understand what kind of that public chatter is so that we can guide our communication strategy and be in the know, right? So nothing's worse than a company coming out and not having an understanding of what's being talked about in the community and saying something is new or saying something is unique when it's actually not. So a PR person really needs to understand that external landscape. So there are different types of public relations. I won't spend a ton of time here, but when we think of positive PR, meaning things that are kind of like uplifting for a company's brand, and the negative PR, where we're really more on the back foot, more on a defensive stance for an organization or an executive. So everything I've talked about thus far really stands in strategic communications. Like, how are we building a brand? How are we elevating a company's brand or an executive's brand, which is thought leadership? How are we taking one executive and enabling them to become more well known in their industry and in their community? This can include things that the organization is doing specifically, like corporate and social involvement, right? How is the company getting involved in their community? How are they giving back? The awards that the company is getting, that's like a speaking and awards program. So is the company getting awards for the product or for the culture or for specific executives? Like, are they getting kind of innovator of the year type awards? That all falls under positive types of PR where we are trying to elevate, we are trying to grow and differentiate. When we think about negative PR, we're thinking more about crisis communications, again, on that defensive foot. So if something happened, like your product hurt someone or something went wrong, there was a data breach, is very relevant to security. That is when we're getting into more of a crisis communications mode where we are putting out messages that is explaining what happened and kind of defending our position, if you will. So that's more damage control and reputation management. What I will say is when it comes to negative PR, there is a type of crisis communications consultant or firms that do just this. Like, they focus and they specialize on negative PR. I'm not one of them. I'm more on the positive PR track. So anyway, just good for you to know. So I do just want to touch quickly on the fact that there is both internal and external communication. So depending on where you work or the types of companies you're talking to, or just good for you to know down the line, there are external communications people and internal communications people. So when we think about PR as external communications, it's all of the messaging and narrative that goes outside of the company, all of the public facing content. So things like press releases, all of your social media channels, your blogs, your videos, your white papers, everything. If you think about your company as like a gate, it's everything that's going outside of the gate that is public to the community, to your customers, to prospective employees, to your investors. Internal communications is really just what happens inside of an organization that's not meant for public consumption. So that usually is overseen by an HR team, a human resources team, with a internal communications person within that team. So this is communicating things to the employees. So things like offsites, right? If we have company events or layoffs, or company progress, that's something that an internal communications person would focus on. So I am an external communications consultant, and I help with internal communications at times, just from a messaging perspective and a story perspective, to ensure that both internal and external communications are completely aligned and that we have the same message. We're not, discounting each other or giving inaccurate information to either audience. But usually internal communications people happens when the company becomes global, when we're talking about multiple people in different countries and we want to remain one brand, like under one umbrella. So PR is often confused with marketing and advertising. So I just want to take a minute to explain, how is PR different? So, public relations sits under the greater marketing umbrella. So, usually the head of communications will report up into the head of marketing. And I would say marketing strives more to fulfill customer needs. When you hear things like marketing is connecting with sales, there's an MQL, a marketing qualified lead. So, a lot of the activities that exist within marketing, such as events, or webinars or content campaigns like email campaigns, those are often very closely tracked to sales. Public relations is not, and so because it's closely tracked to sales, it often has a paid component behind it. Public relations doesn't track to sales. Public relations is more about reputation and about growth and thought leadership. So while it reports into marketing, it can't always be tracked in terms of direct connection to sales. Public relations versus advertising. So, advertising, you can think of something like a billboard or an ad on a website, or something like an event sponsorship, right? Where you're seeing logos, you're seeing merch, that kind of thing. Advertising is often just a one-way conversation. So, in an ad, we're putting out a message within that ad on what the company's looking to communicate about their brand, about their product, about something going on. The key thing for ads and advertising is that it's paid. You have to pay to place your advertisement and wherever it ends up, a magazine, an online site, a conference, banner, that kind of thing. Public relations is largely earned. So PR people are reaching out to reporters or influencers on a free basis. We're not paying for content to be placed. We're not paying for ads to be placed. That's not part of PR. So, one of the largest services within public relations is called media relations. And that is a PR person interacting with a reporter, a journalist, a podcaster to try to get an executive placed, or a quote placed within that publication, within an article. So, there are a couple different types of content strategies. There's earned, owned, and paid. So, owned is all of the content that one organization puts out into the ether. Paid is like advertising and marketing. We're paying for a message to be put out there. And uh, earned is public relations. Earned is I reach out to a reporter. I say, hey, reporter, please cover this really interesting story from my client that's doing really cool things in X, Y, and Z. And the reporter's like, cool, interesting. I'd love to write about this. And they write an article. That process is free. So, what I will say about the media landscape right now is that it is completely unprecedented. Thanks to COVID, a lot of reporters have been laid off. You've probably been hearing about this. Newsrooms have shifted. Print is dying. That's not necessarily a new story, but it continues to happen. So, reaching reporters right now is harder than it's ever been before. There are less reporters covering more news. So, what that means at the moment is really, content is king. Like when we submit free content to an editor, they love it. It's usually thought leadership driven, it's usually vendor neutral, and they want to run with it. So, good for you to know. Okay, so how can PR help your company help a company? I've touched on this a little bit today, but it's really about building brand awareness. So, the more people that know about your company, the better. And that can happen in a ton of different ways, but PR is a main driver of that. So, think about when you see an ad, or think about when you see an executive post on LinkedIn, or you see that company issue a press release with a new product. Or yeah, maybe you're seeing a blog post written by an executive that's placed in a publication that you read, or maybe someone's sending you an article about a company in a Slack thread. All of those are touch points to that organization, and that all builds the brand. It's all of those kind of touch points that is building a reputation for an organization and enabling you to get to know a brand better. It's differentiation. So it's how we know the difference between Coke and Pepsi. What are those main differences? Or Nike and Adidas. Differentiation is so key to building your brand and having PR kind of differentiate what are the key values, what are the key features, the key benefits of your organization. Scaling and growing your organization. So that's a huge part of public relations. The way that I like to think about public relations is it's taking a highlighter to the text of an organization. So when you're in school and you're taking a highlighter to all of the important information, when you're reviewing your highlighter later or just thinking about your notes in general, your eyes are going to go right to that highlighted information because that's the most important stuff that you need to know. That's exactly what public relations is. Public relations is just taking a highlighter to the things that are really interesting and really important about your organization. And then those highlighted items are the things that get shared externally, right? So it looks as if we're growing. We're talking about the leaders that are getting hired. We're talking about the new products that are getting released. Your CEO is speaking at interesting events. They are winning interesting awards. It all comes together for one holistic communication strategy that's just showing highlighted items of your company growing. That's always the goal, is to show that your company is growing and thriving. A lot of that is done through building the profile of key executives and players. So I know we'll talk about that in a little bit in the Q&A portion, but it's all about, coming together in terms of building your specific brand as an executive or as even an entry level person, right? Building that individual brand is where we build the cohesive brand narrative for the organization as well. We're all kind of swimming in the same pool, if you will. And so building your profile as an executive or as a key player in the industry will only positively impact the brand as well. How can PR help you as an individual? So first, it will position you as an expert. So when I talk to executives, I always like to think of them as a subject matter expert. So based on that executive's, relevance to date, their education, their work history, some of their accomplishments, that really positions them as a subject matter expert, where I am kind of taking the best of their accomplishments, their ideas, their points of view, their predictions for how the market is going, and I elevate all of that. I pull out those threads, take a highlighter to them, if you will, and I position that. So it's positioning you as really this kind of interesting, thought-provoking person within the industry. So we're building on your accomplishments, we're building on your reputation. And then it's team success, right? So the better that your organization does, the better you do as a team member. It's like what's that analogy is like all boats rise in a whatever, right? It's like the more the water's rising and the boats are rising, the better everyone does. So the better the organization does, the better each individual will do as well, and vice versa. If you're a really strong representative of your brand, the organization is going to look really strong and like it has a really strong talent as a result. That is my session today. Thank you so much for listening and for attending. I've included here my email address, block@shapeandscale.co. Please feel free to get a hold of me for any questions, any comments, anything you found interesting, anything you want me to dig in deeper to today. I've also included my LinkedIn profile, which is Suzanne Block. That is where you'll find me being like the most active, I would say, both in terms of my musings on industry commentary and some of the conversations I'm having actively with my clients, but then also kind of quirky musings as well. So thank you so much for attending. I know we'll have a Q&A session after this, but I really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Well, Susan, that was really insightful. What you just told us about personal branding, and I think I learned a lot of new things. But I have a few questions that people have asked me when they're starting their journey into a new industry, and the industry I'm in, cybersecurity. So I meet a lot of entry level students who are getting into industry or they're building their career. And one of the questions I always get asked that, hey, how do you build a personal brand? So give us those three quick tips and tricks that you would give it to a student who is just coming into a new industry to consider how to build a brand, personal brand.
Yeah, and I know it can be overwhelming. So I would say to start by picking one channel, and that's probably where the people that you're trying to network are. So LinkedIn, I think, is great for this. If you prefer X, formerly Twitter, or some type of other platform where you feel like there are industry colleagues, peers, folks that you aspire to be. Find that network and join it and just start. Consistency, I would say, is the biggest thing, especially when it comes to like gaining traction in something like a LinkedIn algorithm, getting follows, getting engagement. But take a stance on things. I wouldn't start with things that are controversial, right? But I would say, like, what your opinions are about trends. Start following people, start engaging with them. You build traction. Consistency is the first primary thing. So maybe start by posting twice a week and then try 3 times a week and then work it up to 5 times a week. But I would say go after things like engagement, commenting on others' content, building up other people, connecting with other people, versus just searching for likes and follows on your own things. When you want to build relationships and build your own brand, it's about building a community and people that feel like you support them, they support you. That's ultimately where the cream rises to the top, in my opinion, versus just kind of chasing after likes, chasing after controversial topics. So as you get more comfortable,
Yeah.
start to just have conversations and really take a point of view on trends, things that are coming and going, to have your unique point of view.
It's funny you mentioned that. As part of our curriculum at BTF University, when we go through and when we enroll students, as one of the requirements is you must have LinkedIn profile. And I kid you not, every time, every cohort, we have about 10% people. They're like, "Hey, I'm in security. How dare you asking for LinkedIn? We don't go on social." I respect that. So let me start by saying I respect that.
Sure.
However, if people can't see your skills, your talent, how are you going to get the right target employer or customer for your business? So people want to be entrepreneur, but they don't want to put their skills out there. They don't want to, I call them, sell yourself in a way where people can see you. What's your brand? People needs to attach with that. If they can't, then they can't hire you. They can't recruit you. They don't even know where you exist. And we live in a world where it's not just the 20 miles radius from my home the employer is. No, it might be different country, might be different state, might be different area that you don't have physical outreach. People don't know you, but they want your skills, your talent. But if you're not out there, people don't know you. And the other thing that you mentioned, and I wanna piggyback on that one, where connections, trust is everything in this society. So take that for a second. If I know my cousin has a friend, and if they can vouch for it, him or her, then I can go and have a like pseudo trust already built there. When it comes to branding, so then, and correct me if I'm wrong, I feel that way as well, where if let's say I have a first connection or second connection, and if you're trying to connect with me on LinkedIn, now I have a pseudo trust already that, oh, you know my friend already, or you know my coworker, my colleague, or you know someone that I want to work with. That's a pseudo trust already. That's something I'm invested in you already because you know someone that associated with me, or I look up to that person. So I feel that when it comes to personal branding, it also is important to know first, you mentioned LinkedIn. I'm a huge fan of it. Create that living resume.
Mhm.
Resume is good, but I think LinkedIn is better, in my opinion, because then I get to see who are you connected with? Who
Yep.
are the people actually commenting on your post? What are the topics that you are interested in and you're liking and commenting? To Susan's point, don't just wait for the likes of your post, but comment on others as well. So I know where you stand. What are your opinions about the trend? Excuse me, the trends. So Susan, again, this is where we struggle at VTF, because we have a lot of entry level folks and they just don't understand the importance of personal branding, and they think that personal branding is something that you only get to worry about if you're in Hollywood. Give us an example that how a personal branding can really change someone's career trajectory, that they were not considering personal branding, and with your help now they understand the importance of it and they actually considered that really changed the trajectory where they were going for their career.
Oh, sure. I mean, this is very common with the clients that I currently engage with, specifically founders, like entrepreneurs and CEOs, where they have such a kind of tunnel vision on sales, right? They're trying to acquire growth for their company, but they actually only start to see results in some cases when they work more on their personal branding. It's this kind of trend, I would say, really in a post-COVID era where we want to align our personal values with the brands that we're buying from, right? We want to know who's working for the company of the brands that we're buying from. We want to create a sense of loyalty with them. And so if we're only just kind of getting this like, overly professional, overly conservative view of like a CEO or an entrepreneur, and we don't really feel like we know them, we're not as inclined to buy. And so in my world, it's really about showing your personality. And that can often change the trajectory of the way that the entrepreneur brands themselves and like ultimately succeeds within their specific workplace. And I think that's so important in cyber. There's so many voices happening in cyber, like the
Yeah.
community at large is so active, and then it really gets kind of segmented into different types of cyber that people are in. So I see that a lot. And so I
Yeah.
think the more that you're able to talk about your personal trajectory, your personal interests, versus just like cybersecurity tools, which are a dime a dozen in many cases, I really do think that will change the trajectory of how you're viewed within the community. And I work with CEOs and entrepreneurs on that constantly.
Absolutely. You're absolutely right. Spot on that one. One thing I'll recognize here and add to it where in general, okay, I'm not picking on anyone. I'm not saying specifically 100% all of it. No, it's in general, the consensus is that people who are in IT or cyber or these sort of professions or industry, they're introverts.
Yeah.
So by nature, it's very hard for an introvert to come out and sell themselves. I'm just gonna
Yeah.
say it in the softer language, you can soften it up, but at the end of the day, that's what we're trying to do. I'm
Yep.
trying to demonstrate my skill, my talent, my experience so that I can get hired or I can get clients or customers if I'm an entrepreneur. So the problem here is that introverts now are trying to build their brand. That's controversial in its own nature, right? Because you're introvert, you don't want to talk to people, you don't want to be in the spotlight, and yet you need to build a personal brand. So
Yeah.
maybe give us that angle where how introverts can also consider that personal branding is something is important to everyone, but for introverts, how can they actually have a little kind of softer landing to it? Let's just put it that way.
I love this question. And I will say, as someone that personally straddles the introvert extrovert line on any given day, this really, really resonates. So I think the advice I'm about to give, I think translates to both personal branding, but then also to sales as well. So my number one recommendation is to go with the avenue where you are most comfortable. So for example, let's just say we're talking about a networking event with a bunch of other cyber individuals where there's cocktails, right? And you walk into a room, maybe you know one or two people, and then you're supposed to network and meet people and kind of introduce yourself and say what you're working on and et cetera, et cetera. Me personally, that makes me sweaty just thinking about it. That is not my avenue of building my brand, of selling myself. I am so much better in a one on one environment, something like a virtual coffee, right? Like asking someone in my community that I really want to get to know, hey, do you want to have a virtual coffee with me? I'll either send you a $5 Starbucks gift card or we'll just meet on Zoom for 15 minutes as a really informal way of getting to know each other. There is also just going to get coffee or going to get a drink with one person, right? So that for me is much more comfortable. I do way better in a one on one setting where I feel like I can engage and give you my full attention and not network with a room full of people. So to get back to the question is like network and build your brand in a way that you feel personally comfortable. So if that's in a one-on-one environment, if that's in a group environment, some people, my business partner for example, he gets really energized by walking into a room of people. He wants to go to a conference where there are hundreds of people and he doesn't know anyone, and he
That's
thinks
me.
that's you. Wonderful. That's like a really time effective way to
Yeah.
get to know a lot of people, right? Like
Yes.
and so that's not for me. That's not for everyone. So I think if we're already doing a lot of selling of ourself in this personal brand
Yeah,
environment, so do it in a way that makes you actually comfortable, rather
sure.
than joining like a Slack networking group and just starting there and starting to build that way. Like whatever introverts feel like they will have the most amount of comfort, do that. I think you have to push yourself outside of your comfort zone a little bit, but start there, especially in the beginning of your journey. And I think you'll get better results.
I totally get it. Yeah. My wife has a joke for me every time we go to family gatherings or friends' parties. She's like, don't be yourself, because I'm just gonna try to grab that spotlight and start talking to a bunch of people, and it's just I take the whole space, you
Yeah.
know. So she always has this joke for me that whenever we are going to friends parties and stuff, like, don't be yourself. I know you're gonna try to get on that podium, trying to fight a mic and trying to just talk to people, let people have a good time, let them just have fun and maybe find a corner, read a book or something. But anyways, yeah, that's absolutely right. Like, having, if you're an introvert and you need to build a personal brand, have those things which can energize you but
Right.
also overlap with personal branding. You have a talent, you have a skill, you want to put it out there, but you can do it on your own terms as well. You don't have to go outside of your comfort zone if you're not comfortable, but maybe stretch a little bit, so that, again, the whole point here is to put your brand out there. And if you are not working towards it, no one knows about it. Just that simple. You want to amplify the reach. So you want to amplify people know you, but you could do it on your own terms, however you want it. But have a plan, make a plan, go through that. So I
Yeah.
love it. Well, Susan, any takeaways for us, that as we're wrapping up and we are going away with this great session from you, how to build a personal brand? I love the example about LinkedIn. I always talk about it. Any
Yeah.
key takeaways that people can walk away with?
I guess the main thing is just this doesn't happen overnight, building a personal brand, right? Especially if you just start posting to a specific network or you just start creating content. Like it really does take months, like even years potentially, to really become a known entity in your field. So it's all about consistency. Let that be more gratifying that your whole brand doesn't start and stop with one post, right? That either performs well or doesn't perform well, but instead it's a journey and it's all about consistency and making sure that you're offering value to your community.
Excellent. Well, I want to thank you, Suzanne, for accepting my offer to come in and speak to us. This was really insightful. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.